Aloha from Maui, everyone. This is Tasha with LA Live Action, and I am here with Kim Rivers. I am super excited. Kim, aloha.
Aloha.
All right, Kim, where are you in the world?
I am in Western Massachusetts in an area called the Berkshires. And for those that know a little sort of landmark famous places, think Tanglewood,
Okay.
Boston Symphony Summer Home. But I am in the largest city right in the center of the most western part of Massachusetts. I am very close to the New York State border. So
Wow.
New England, we're in depths of winter and it's very cold right here.
Oh God. Yeah, I feel feel like a whiny baby every single time I say, "Oh my God, it's so cold here. It's like 69 degrees."
It's
um,
about -17
oh
in
dear God.
Fahrenheit right now, so I'm not sure. That's pretty chilly in Celsius, but it's cold. Let's just say it's cold.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I know that you're doing stuff in lots of different places other than just where you're at. Can you share a little bit about the work that you're doing all over?
Sure. One of the places that I am very connected to is New Mexico. I have traveled back and forth to New Mexico since about 2007 and would spend 5 or 6 weeks there. I connected with a woman's land, an organization called Women, Earth, and Spirit, and their mission was to teach women of all ages, all generations, to bring a lot of different groups together and learn to do sustainable earth building. So a traditional adobe building that's common to the area. And the first summer I think I spent in New Mexico in 2008, I was there for about 5 weeks and found myself doing adobe earth building, carpentry, plumbing, wiring, and creating these beautiful structures and just living in community for a while with about 14 other women from all over the country. And I really should say all over the continent because there were some women from Canada, and they would bring in different experts. So people who were very familiar with this kind of building, and we would teach each other and have share-ins and just kind of live communally. And then it's a very different environment and living in the high desert. So it's near it's in the Santa Fe National Forest. So, low desert, high desert, very different places from where I live here in New England. It was amazing and beautiful and struck such a chord in me that I kept going back, and I would go back in the winter. I would go back in summer and spring and usually spend a few weeks at a time and learn some different skills, and made such a good, strong connection with this place and this organization that uh, oh, right around the end of the summer, the original founder and organizer, who is of course, as we all are aging, said, "Hey, I need somebody to take over this organization. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, and we've gotten a bequest for $85,000, but we want to continue to kind of promote the work and do the things." She's like, "But I can't do it, and I'd like you to take over." So I took over. I formed a
Wow.
board. And come to find out, I had to laugh because my friend's name is Jay, the original founder, and people kept saying, "Well, you're vice president of the board." And I finally went back to her and I said, "Jay, everybody keeps telling me that I am vice president of the board." And she's like, "Oh yeah, I probably should have told you that." And she would just laugh, and I would be like, "Jay."
That's
Now
funny.
I'm president of the board, but I knew that was going to happen. And so we are managing this money and giving grants to other nonprofits. We gave some money. We did a campaign for the Oregon fires. There was another 501c3
Oh wow.
uh, in Oregon called the Wild Women of Rogue Valley, and we did a matching funds campaign to help with the wildfires that caused a lot of displacement of women from their lands. So that was one thing that we did. So that is one of the organizations that I'm most connected to, but it has been probably about 3 or 4 years since I've been back there because of one thing or another. And then, of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, no one's traveling. So people who are there right now are there. There's a number of young women on the land right there in New Mexico, and we have communicated by Zoom and just by phone and email. But I am long overdue for a visit, and I miss being there. It is my second home. It is my Southwest home. So
That's amazing. Oh
eventually
my
I will be
gosh.
back.
Yeah, wow. And I know that you are also doing a project in Albania. Can
Yeah.
you share a little bit about that as well?
Well, ESD Global has been, of course, continuing to train people in all kinds of ways and forms, whether it be online or in person. And a couple of folks, Nina Wenik and Gentiana Sujaj, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, who is Albanian. ESD Global collaborated and got some grants from UN Women and the
Yes.
Swedish government to train a cohort in Albania, which happened in November. So Nina was there and Gentiana was there, and they trained, I believe, 13 women in Albania. And so they just graduated. So another aspect of ESD Global is that they provide a group of mentors for new graduate cohorts. And each Oh, there's a number of mentoring groups. I know that there are some from Africa, there are some number in the US, Latin America. Each kind of group is given a couple of mentors. So for the Albanian group that just graduated, I am the lead mentor, and Gentiana is the supporting mentor, kind of on site. And we continue to provide them with guidance so that they can begin to teach classes, in terms of, I feel like from my standpoint as the lead mentor, I'm holding the container for them. And if they have questions about how do I teach, this, that, or the other thing, we might do a mock class or have short meetings. We do have monthly meetings and communicate very regularly with Gentiana, and we just keep kind of trying to engage them and find out what their needs are. And I recently just started setting up individual meetings with each woman who wants to meet with me to meet for about a half hour each time and just say, what is the most pressing thing that I can support you with right now? And we take it from there. So that, and I'm very new to this. I am kind of a brand new mentor, but ESD
Well,
Global,
you're seasoned though. You've been
I'm
doing
seasoned
teaching
in
for
in
so
in
long.
teaching, but as a mentor, there's a great group of mentors. We meet monthly as a group of mentors, and we have great support. Our kind of manager, or maybe even director would be the appropriate term, is Clara Porter, who is quite experienced, and she guides all the mentors, and we meet regularly and we talk to each other and help kind of create, again, the container for all the other containers that we're holding. So if you think of it, almost, I guess I would say it's almost like the nest, and maybe as a mentor, I am the shell of the egg inside the nest, and then inside that is all the life force of the egg
Getting a
for,
whole visual right now of
yeah, yeah,
all of it.
yeah. So just layers upon layers of kind of support. So I get support as a mentor. I can provide support to my mentees and see them through their different levels, which you're familiar with because you're working on your levels. People who just graduate, they start at one level, they're in level one, and then they agree to do a certain number of hours in
Yep.
return for training. And then after that,
Yes.
they can advance if they so choose through different levels of expertise. And we just sort of guide them through that process and make sure that they are getting where they want to go in the way they want to get there.
Which
So
I really love that, and how that is so different from being at a martial arts school where you're getting belts and everything, it's nice to know that there's still a progression, but I feel like there's a lot more agency in it where you're really choosing like, okay, how many hours do I put in? If I want to reach this goal, these are the different criteria, which
Right.
I know that martial arts does that as well, but it's just a
Yeah.
little bit of a different experience. That being said, I wanted to ask you, I feel like we jumped the gun. I want to hear about your background, which is helpful, right, for people to know.
Sure.
Um, so can you share a little bit about your background when it comes to martial arts and ESD, and why you decided to go into ESD?
Mhm. Way back when I was in 1996, hearkening back to a time I was a college student and I think I might have been doing my human services. I was in human services. And then, I will say part of that journey has been working, I've always worked in human services or social work. And I actually have a master's in social work. I went on and, did my undergraduate and then my graduate degree in social work, and promptly decided I didn't want to be a social worker once I did all that. But at the same time, that understanding and care and desire to work with people has uh, come full circle and manifested in a different way. And I'm really glad that I took the path through social work. So, but when I was doing my undergraduate degree, or I should say my associate's degree at my community college, I was you were required to have a physical education course, which I was like, I mean, I could do some, weightlifting or golf. And I was always into kind of doing some of that stuff anyways. But when I saw self-defense, I was like, ooh, what's that? And I took the course and met this amazing instructor. Her name is Mary Eastland. And actually I will just say as an aside, she is also an Aikido instructor with her husband, Ron Ragusa, and they are currently my Aikido instructors. And so
Ah,
that is sort of like everything folded in together, which was great. But first time meeting her, took a 10-week course, met twice a week, met some of her students who were helping her out, who actually now are my cohorts in Aikido and have known now some of them for quite some time, since 1996, actually. Took this 10-week course, loved it, and it was amazing. It was there's no understatement when I say it was life changing, because I was certainly always looking for a channel for my energy. I always had a strong feminist inkling to myself and understood a lot about what happens in our community, the injustices that happen to people, to women, to people of color, or just anyone who it does not fit the status quo. And but I didn't have what I felt like was an active way to address that, especially around things around abuse and domestic violence and sexual assault and all the things that I knew were happening, but I didn't know what to do with it.
hmm.
The knowledge was there, but I didn't have a clear path about how can I help address this. And self-defense was like that, aha, now it seems like there is something. It's not just, we're going to sit around and talk about theory or just kind of be wistfully wishing that we could address it somehow. And, and there's a lot of ways to address it. We know there's a lot of layers. But self-defense, I feel like I am a person of action. I am like, let's talk more action. It's just the way I am. I've talked about things so much and I'm like, I'm kind of done talking about it and I'm ready to sort of do something about it. And I am a doer as opposed to, I can theorize with the best, but I'd rather be a person of action. So self-defense felt like that. So this course sparked that for me. And then at the end of the course, it was like the last day and people had done their finals. Mary and her students, and they said, well, we're going to give you a little demonstration of what our art our martial art is, and it was Aikido. And they said, we're going to be right back. And they went and changed into their gis, and they're wearing those long flowing hakamas, which are the long
Love,
divided
love the
shirts.
hakamas.
I
Yes.
love the hakama. And when they came in, first of all, I went, cool. They look so cool. And then Mary brought in all these really big men that trained in her dojo with her, who weren't in the class with us, just suddenly like these towering guys who looked huge, and promptly began to throw them around like it was nothing.
Yeah.
And like would just look so easy for her. Now she's about 6 feet tall herself, so you know, for her it was like, but still. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. That is cool. And I tell people, and it's true to this day, that Aikido for me was like the ringing of a bell in my being. Because there was grace, it seemed harmonious, and I thought, I want to do that. Not only do I want to do self-defense, but I want to do that. And then I was still in school, and I was still taking classes at the college. I had another year to go. Mary offered Self-Defense 2, which is the only time that course was ever offered at the college. It was kind of a deeper exploration. Went through that 10-week class again. I was like, this is great. And she kept saying, you know, you have this kind of, without trying, this Aikido-esque kind of quality to you, the way you redirect things or just the way you move, and you sort of do it naturally. She's like, not that I want to push you into my class. She's like, but do you want to consider some Aikido? You know, and you can come check it out. We'll let you come for free, and you can just come see if you'd like to, if it fits for you. And then of course saw a demonstration of again, and I was like, yes, I forgot about this. It had been a whole year. I was like, I'm going to do this. And I took the leap, and I started training first with just her. She was teaching at a local school nearby. I was also had started Tai Chi at the same time, which was kind of mellow and sweet. It was bringing me some of that inner harmony. I feel like it's a great, almost like a
So
sister.
yes, also a great style. That's another one that I've
Kind of like,
studied.
it feels like a sister to Aikido for me. It's like,
Yes.
you know, one's sort of like the real chill sister, one's sort of like a little more hyper, but I'm still kind of chill sister. So they both really harmonize for me.
Tai Chi Quan is also, it's like the hard style for Tai Chi. So
Yeah,
that's like a nice pairing of those as well. I've seen
I
both
have
of you.
I have never tried that. But then, you know, once you kind of get involved in one martial art, you sort of start to see the peripheries of others that
Yes.
become, as in my area, there are martial artists that kind of have get-togethers, and it's sort of, so since 97, I have pretty consistently done Aikido and Tai Chi
It's awesome.
every week. And Aikido for me, you know, when I first started, I would train. There were a lot more classes available. We were all a bit younger, so we would have a class like every day, sometimes twice a day.
Wow.
And I would just, all I could get. It was like, you know, when you just are feasting, and I was like, just more, more. I was like the sponge. I was like, more, just give me more. I will just absorb as much as I can get. And that is my background, and I have kept that up. And even when I was away at school or traveling, I would continue to you know, connect with them. When I was doing my graduate degree and I was in school in Springfield, Mass, I would come home whatever weekend I could, and I would immediately be like, when's the next Aikido class? When can I get down to the dojo? And we still train, even now during COVID, 3 times a week on Zoom.
Oh, that's wonderful.
We're still meeting. They're having Zoom classes, and we log in and we practice with our invisible partners. If we don't have anyone who in our bubble that we train with, and we go through all the motions and do our weapons practice.
I
And
love that. What weapons do you do?
Boken, which is
Okay. Yeah.
and Joe staff.
I love the Joe. Yeah.
And you know, sometimes we will say, so go grab the spatula from the kitchen and see what that feels like as a weapon. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we've done classes where we use a book bag the entire, because this is like, what do you have on hand?
Yep,
So, you know, I don't carry my bokken everywhere I go, but I might carry a backpack or a water bottle.
exactly.
So how can I use that?
Yeah, I love
Um,
that.
and right around 2000, well, maybe more like 1998, 99, Mary saw that I was pretty dedicated to both the Aikido, and I had taken her 2 self-defense classes. So backing up a little bit to that, she said, you know, I could use somebody as a regular assistant in my self-defense class. You now have experience working with me on the mat in the dojo, so you know how to sort of uh, take the energy I give you without being injured, and you seem to have a little acting ability, so you can sort of, you know, if I feign a strike,
You're
you
like,
respond, you know, you respond like you just got palm heel striked. So that's great, and it's good for other students to see. You know how to fall down, and so that's what I did a lot of.
yeah,
I spent about 3 or 4 years just pretty much getting thrown around by her on the mat in a more self-defense context,
yeah,
which
with
was a little more intense. And just exploring other martial arts, which for me were like, you know, a little jujitsu, a little bit more of the striking arts. I kind of like a little boxing, but then I was like, I like pieces of them, but it wasn't for me.
yeah, yeah.
Aikido is really my art. That and Tai Chi are my arts. Kind of like to cultivate my sense of peace and harmony.
Hmm.
But the self defense is sort of this is my response to the world in terms of how do I deal with things that maybe are a bit adverse.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
that's
and then
great.
Mary in 2006, Mary decided in 2005, she decided to retire
Oh, okay,
from teaching self-defense at the college.
okay.
It, being older, she's about 10 years my senior. So she was like, you know, I just want to focus on my Aikido.
Yeah,
I don't want to teach self-defense. But the class is popular at the college, and they want to continue it. So I'm going to suggest to the dean that you take over, and I'll just, you know, she gave me a nice reference. I brought in my resume. I had just graduated from social work school. They were like, great, you're hired. I began in the fall of 2006 and pretty much have taught steadily at the college up until fall of 2019.
that is so cool.
Every
That's so
semester,
cool.
10 weeks, you know, each semester, plus any other self-defense classes. So I've been at it for a while, and same, so really consistently, and will am always open to studying different things. And then found ESD Global in, well, I will say I found the National Women's Martial Arts Federation
Hmm.
and ESD Global. I kind of did I did this ESD Global level 1 training in New York State in
Yep.
2018.
Yes.
And you did one in what, 2019?
2019. Yeah.
2019. So you know what I'm talking about. And for
Yep.
your listeners, it's a very intensive week of very intense self-defense training with a lot. We sort of that balance between discussion and theory and actual practice.
Yes.
And at the same time, I was doing my certification through the National Women's Martial Arts Federation as a self-defense instructor, which is a little bit, they're not, you do have to do some videotaping
Okay.
of that, but you do a lot more writing. It's almost like you're doing a thesis submission of your self-defense experience.
Nice.
And I highly recommend it in conjunction with whatever ESD Global or other organizations are doing, because that process, which took about a year and a half, and I had a mentor, really helped me hone my understanding and philosophy of my self-defense, and where my strengths and my challenges lied. It was a really excellent process, and I believe ESD Global is in lots of collaboration with the National Women's Martial Arts Federation. There's a lot of
I see a lot of crossover. Yeah.
there is a lot of crossover. I was at the camp, Be Brave camp in I think it was 2019. It's hard to remember. This COVID pandemic seems to have blurred time a little bit for me, but in 2019, and I just see a lot of the same people at every event. I'm like, oh, it's you, it's you, it's you. I see you everywhere, and here you are.
Yeah.
At self-defense stuff, and on Zoom, and at martial arts camp, just a lot of the same people. And I think that that's actually really great because it means that we might in some ways be duplicating stuff, but at the same time, it means that there's a lot of good conversation and we're sharing knowledge. And I think that that's really key.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from my martial arts experience, it was really interesting to me because there were sister schools, sister dojos that we would do tournaments with and stuff like that. But it was very isolated. It was very much like, this is the right way, this is the only way. Don't check out other schools. Don't look up stuff on the internet. Don't, like all of these things. It was very limiting. And what I love with ESD Global and what I've also seen from, I haven't been as involved with the National Women's Martial Arts Association. But I did do, I believe they had, was it a summit or something over the summer? I was involved in going to different sessions for that. I thought that that was wonderful. And what I just
Yeah.
loved is that there's so much collaboration and it's not competitive. It's more of like, no, you've got this, this is your strength, rock it. Over here, this is what you're doing. I love it. This is different. Here you go. And it's very much in a collaborative build each other up as far as just honoring everyone for where they're at and all of the work that they do.
Yeah, it's a lot of explore, 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 and to try things that you normally wouldn't do. And that's what I really love about the camps at the Martial Arts Federation, is that you get to it's like you're at a buffet and you get to try all the different things. And then there's the Association of Women's Martial Arts Instructors, which has also another kind of, that's a little more specific to just the martial arts, but in a lot of ways, very experienced instructors getting together and sharing knowledge as instructors with all these different martial arts. So I haven't been to any of their camps yet. I think they tend to happen. There's so much. I want to be everywhere at once, and sometimes I can't. So, but I have yet to get to one of their conferences and be amongst experienced teachers. But again, some crossover there as well. So,
Yeah,
looking forward.
got that FOMO going on.
Yeah, right on, right on. So,
Um, so a lot of people go into martial arts and self-defense for a lot of different reasons.
mhm.
Usually, it has to do with there's definitely the empowerment piece, but usually there's a story behind the why. So, what is your why?
Huh. What is my why? Um, I think for me, having had unfortunately being, I could say that I am part of the Me Too. So that, of course, having been experienced the the very unfortunate and disempowering incidents of being assaulted,
Yeah,
and also I identify as lesbian, so that in itself has made me sometimes a target
yeah,
in street harassment, and being associated with an organization locally, Elizabeth Freeman Center, which provides sexual assault and domestic violence. All of those things, and I have, many years ago, involved with Take Back the Nights, which don't really happen a lot anymore here in the US.
hmm,
But I was involved as a teenager with a group called Women Against Violence, and kind of brought up by a group of feminists who were organizers for Women Against Violence and that did Take Back the Night marches. And I was at the time like 16 years old, but they were in their in their 30s and 40s at that time. So being sort of brought into this fold and being given a lot of information. And I say that I was, raised by feminists, so
yeah,
having that experience from women who were part of the, second wave of the women's liberation movement in the 70s and 80s. And what's interesting is a lot of those women now are on the board or work for Elizabeth Freeman Center. And so I also entered as a board member for this organization and was on the board for about 11 years and recently left the board so I could help them as a staff member. And I work in their shelter.
Oh, that's
And we
wonderful.
had a International Women's Day celebration that, of course, we used to do in person. And some of the oldest members who were, helped found this organization back in the day when it was originally two organizations, Rape Crisis Center and Women's Services Center, and then they merged
Hmm.
because they were duplicating each other. And I remember the executive director brought me to the two oldest founding mothers and said, and look at our little Kimmy, didn't we raise her right? And I was like, oh gosh. But in a way, for them, I'm still 40 years younger than the oldest member. So yeah, they still see me in a lot of ways as a kid, as they're kind of like, to them, they're sort of like my mothers and aunties, who raised me. So that's a lot of the why, because I'd had the experience of being sexually assaulted, because I'd had the experience of being targeted as a lesbian, because and to also have the juxtaposition of the women's liberation and consciousness raising through these women, and understanding that I wasn't alone in those things, that is kind of systemic and social, part of the social fabric, which is really unfortunate
Yeah.
of these things happening. um, and that in this society, just being born a female, and I think the experience that other people have of, the trans that we see in the LGBTQ, the trans movement,
Yes.
and for women of color, and really anyone, and I don't want to diss white men, but really anyone who isn't a straight white guy kind of gets to deal with being not, having to deal with a lot that they really don't need to, and I
Yeah.
wish they didn't have to deal with. So outside that normative bell curve, that is my why. That's my why. Because I want to be able to continue the conversation with compassion and kindness, but also emphasize that my right to exist
Yeah.
and to be outside that norm, and to want to be able to not only protect myself, and I'll do it with as much kindness and compassion up to a point. And then after that, but I want to be able to have the tools for that when I say no, thank you, maybe nicely at first, and that doesn't get heated, to be able to say, I said no, or that doesn't work for me, or I want to be able to address this in a way, that I want to have a myriad of tools and a lot of options at my availability, so that as I deal with any adverse situation, or even anything that is, challenging, to be able to employ those, about whether it's self-care or having good boundaries, or addressing a conflict situation, de-escalating, and not only just for me, but to be able to share that with others, and to be able to say, hey, these are the tools that I have found that works, and this is the methodology through like ESD training, empowerment self-defense training, and this is what we've learned works, and now I can share that with others. So
Well, so you're thank you for sharing the why. I think that it is so important for people to understand why we do this work, because there's always a story. There's always several stories that lead us on the path to being a self-defense instructor and choosing this. Another piece that I wanted to bring up that relates to that is that there are martial arts artists out there who don't get it. There are martial artists out there who are teaching women self-defense, who are
yeah,
male with male instructors or male, and they have female assistants, but they don't have women leading. And they don't have the understanding or the concepts of self-defense. What they're teaching is, here, do this move here, and these are the counter moves. They're not using voice. They're not talking about de-escalation tactics, boundary setting, any of that. From you, what do you believe the difference is between martial arts and self-defense? How do you think it is a danger, to be teaching without the background knowledge when it comes to all of those other areas?
Wow, that is a big question.
Yes. Put you in the spotlight.
So I think martial arts can be very helpful.
Yes, they can.
I think that they certainly are their own valid system, but they're, hmm, trying to think about how I want to phrase this. Maybe could we break your question into a couple of components,
Let's
because
do
my
it.
mind is swimming a little bit. Can you
Yes.
start with sort of the first part?
Okay, so difference between martial arts and self-defense.
I think martial arts is a long system that has a lot of components to it and a lot of tradition. And I think in a lot of ways it's based on hierarchy.
Yeah.
So that seems to be a key point, in that martial arts is really based in a hierarchical system that um, has certainly a level of degrees, rank, whatever. You have to sort of learn a lot of things. Now, it depends on the martial arts system, but I know a lot of them involve learning a kata, a set form,
Mm-hmm.
and based on set, and maybe even I would say predetermined attacks and that kind of responsiveness. And it's based on martial systems, I think, of warfare that are rooted in a lot of ancient traditions
Absolutely.
and social. I want to say social agreements of how that warfare or an attack and defense is going to happen. Whereas self-defense kind of deals with the unexpected and the now, and what one needs to do to create immediate safety and to end that attack and get to safety. So it doesn't have it is its own system, but it's also, I think the difference is, and I think Judith Siddiqman and other very experienced people who have had both a lot of time in both martial arts and self-defense would say martial arts is based on kind of prolonging that system, and that you don't really move forward, whereas self-defense is really about using your strongest parts against their weakest points, whereas martial arts maybe is more about using force against force.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I'm being clear on that, but I the things that so my background is in Aikido, and in a self-defense situation, I'm probably not going to rely so much on my Aikido training and its flowy redirect. I mean, maybe it might come in a little bit second nature because I've done it for so long, but I am not going to try to do all this redirecting and throw into a big role somebody. I am going to rely on maybe attacking the most vulnerable points, because I don't want to stay around and try to go into back and forth. I want to end that situation if I'm in danger. And it might even be just using my voice and saying, I said stop, leave me alone, and bolting. And and if I have to, doing some kind of quick strike. And my goal is to get away and get to safety, whereas in some martial arts it's about engaging and staying engaged and all this other stuff. and showing who's the stronger and who's going to come out the winner. That is not the same in self-defense. Self-defense is about ending that situation, getting to safety as quickly as you can and in the most efficient and direct way possible.
Yeah.
So I
No,
don't know
that,
if that makes sense in terms of the and martial arts has a long-standing tradition of being, of course, I think earlier you asked the question about, martial arts predominantly has been taught by men and addresses the way that men combat or fight with other men or attack other men. And that is
yes.
very different from the way that men attack women or other people who don't identify as, quote, a man. So, so that their attack is very different.
Yes. So, yeah,
And the
when it comes,
response to that needs to be different as well.
yeah, a lot of the martial arts styles that were made, some of them for, hundreds of years old. Uh, and it's this regimen that you go through,
Hmm.
and it doesn't necessarily address all of the different needs that might be happening currently in society today, or
Right.
different attacks that could happen. Another thing that is noted is that a lot of them, it is a combat, and originally it was made for men fighting against men. It wasn't men fighting against women. It wasn't women fighting against women.
Right.
And when I look at self-defense, I see, and I've seen the progression for me, even because I have an Aikido background, but I also studied, 6 other styles of Japanese martial arts and Tai Chi and different stuff like that. And I remember when I was originally teaching my self-defense classes, I had the concept, the idea of empowerment self-defense in my mind, where it was that we needed to have practical moves. And that was something that was very important to me. We needed something that was practical, that anybody could use, that you didn't have to be a martial artist. It was like having the cliff notes. So in my mind, self-defense was the cliff notes of martial arts. And you didn't have to be a rocket scientist. You didn't have to go 5 days a week. But the other piece to that too was that I love that in self-defense, there are no absolutes. When it
Right.
comes to martial arts, it's very much you punch here, you block here, this is right, this is wrong. And so I remember when I first started learning that I needed to be using, no, it's choices, it's tools. Why would you tell somebody that this is absolute when this other avenue might be the one that saves their life? So having them actually be able to understand that, and that's something that I've really loved with the empowerment self-defense. What my other question was what is the danger that can occur if someone is teaching what they say is self-defense, but they don't understand that methodology, that concept of the background, the importance of having that background, having a trauma-informed background as well, just so that you're able to um, properly support the people who are coming in your door to learn. Because I know that for me, going into a dojo after dealing with a stalker and a confrontation, I wanted to go in because I wanted to learn, and in my mind, I wanted to learn to fight, but really I wanted to learn to defend myself. And
Mhm.
I found myself re-traumatized over and over because I was putting myself in these situations where these men were, in my mind, they were attacking me.
Right. Well, I think you have named one of the big dangers right there is that especially for a lot of a lot of I don't want to say just women, but predominantly a lot of women have faced assaults. And when we look at like the Me Too, why that is such a significant movement, because it begins to tell our stories of like really how many of us. And when I have looked at that, I have not met one woman yet who hasn't experienced something, not one. And that's really sad and kind of telling right there. And when we teach self-defense, having that trauma informed understanding means that, first of all, we pay attention. So we look at how people are reacting. We try to recognize when they are beginning to shut down or become overwhelmed, what, slipping outside that window of tolerance, when they are no longer able to process. Can't say that they're necessarily full on triggered, but they might be beginning to experience anxiety or feeling shut down. How do we recognize when that's happening? And do, with self-defense, with that trauma-informed lens, we would step back, we might shift what we're doing, we might take a break, we might sit and talk and process. We want to reorient that person. One of the dangers in some of the martial arts is, for all the good intentions, that they might just be going full out and they're not paying attention to that. And again, like what your experience was, and I've seen this on the mat in the dojo, and this happened for me when I started full on training with a lot of the guys in the dojo, was these really big men, and I'm not very tall. I'm about 5'3" on a good day. Um, and, I was certainly a bit more small when I was younger. Having these big guys come at me, and I would just sort of go, ah, what do I do? And now I've got this big guy all on me. And I would be like, and they're like, Sensei's like, just throw him. And meanwhile, I'm sweating and freaking out. And I am like, he's grabbing me. I'm just like frozen. And thankfully, my senseis are a little bit more informed, because Mary was a self-defense instructor, and a lot of the women, we are more predominantly women in my Aikido dojo, so a lot of informed experience for the men in our dojo about that, and being able to see, and sometimes seeing women and even some of the men just break down on the mat, just start to cry, because it would churn up so much stuff. So the danger is that we can continually bring up the experience, and not we, but the inexperience of martial artists teaching self-defense without that lens of being trauma informed, can continually bring up for their participants that re-traumatization, to just feel like, I'm going through this again and again, and you don't ever get past that. And in fact, you can create an aversion that you're like, I don't want to get anywhere near this. And so you constantly are back. It's like you're reinforcing that place of maybe inaction or being shut down or disassociation, that then it just gets harder and harder to work through. So that if you're ever back in a situation where you really have to call upon your self-defense, and you've had that training in this particular martial art, that you've been taught, well, this is, you hit here, but now you're frozen or shut down or not present, you're not going to be able to access that.
Yeah.
So by being able to address that, and to realize that there's levels of self-defense training. So, sometimes just using your voice or your stance, you don't always have to go 0 to 60. And I feel like sometimes that happens with the male-centered martial arts training
Yep.
around self-defense. They're just like, just punch them in the throat. And it's like, well, you know, um, okay, so I'm at my family gathering and Uncle Bob's just being a little too touchy. I'm not gonna punch Uncle Bob in the throat. Like, maybe if he didn't want to listen to what I said, but maybe I just need to say, Uncle Bob, you need to, like, you're making me uncomfortable, Uncle Bob, and I really just want you to, like, back up, okay? Because you're not making me feel good. Or talking to Aunt Marge, who, saying, we need to talk to Uncle Bob. He's being a little too handy with me. And, it's interesting. I'll bring this a little more real life. My sister, my sister, who has done impact with me, when I come and visit at the house, she tells the nieces and nephews, come up and see your aunt and give her a hug, and I always say, care, they don't need to give me a hug if they don't want to. It always makes me a little uncomfortable when she says, give your
Yeah.
aunt a hug. because I'm like, maybe they don't want to. And I always tell them, you give me a hug in your own time if you want to. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying hi, but I don't. The predetermined, like, give your aunt a hug, just always makes me go,
Yeah.
because, you know, why should they have to give me a hug? That sort of forced contact, you know?
Well, that's something that I go over when I'm teaching youth because
Yeah,
I do youth programming for different schools, and it's something that they believe that that's something that they have to do,
right.
and there's this obligation, and if they don't want to do it, that can be traumatizing in itself. That'll stick with them. And so just the ripple effect of understanding that they, even though that they're young, they still have that agency. I think that's so important.
Right. And so one of the strategies, and really this is sort of the difference, is that in ESD, sort of tackling that in a preliminary way. So now, well, I haven't visited in a while, but when I go and visit, or have, I will talk to my sister beforehand, before I even get there, and say, we've talked about this, and I know it's a good intention on your part, and you want to you want to foster connection between me and the kiddos, but I, I would like you not to have them feel obligated to come hug me or even to say hello. Let them come in their own time, which almost inevitably will happen, you know. And it might even be a few days into the visit, and all of a sudden I have realized that I'm sitting on the couch, and my youngest nephew is 6, is now sort of in the crook of my arm and leaning into me, and maybe we're looking at the iPad together, and he's got his head on my shoulder, and he's sort of nestled in. And even my oldest niece, who is like 18, who thinks I'm kind of so uncool at this point anyways, has come and has, you know, now she's like, she's come up and she's sort of put her arm around me, but she has decided on her own initiative and not predetermined by
Yeah.
anybody else. And it just feels so much more authentic. And I think that that is, you know, and part of when you asked earlier about one of the dangers, about male martial artists teaching self-defense for women, is that it still instills that males are going to be the protectors
Yes. Yeah.
always. And yet at the same time, the truth is that a lot of the time, especially in heteronormative relationships, they may also be the aggressors or the danger. So how can they be both the protector and the danger at the same time? And it continues that mythology around that, that a good guy will always protect a woman. And there are good guys out there, but women and others and even men need to protect them. We want them to protect themselves and not necessarily have to rely on another person. It's great when people can come to our aid, but they may not always be there.
Yeah.
So it doesn't serve anybody if I teach you to realize, you know, to rely on the strength that a male martial artist is using to teach this particular technique that works great for him because he's 6'5" and 300 pounds and has been training and he's 25 years old. That is that same tool that he's teaching, which may be effective for him, it may not work for the 50-year-old woman in a wheelchair who
Yeah.
is, you know, or trans woman in a wheelchair who is, you know, doesn't have the same physical attributes. It's not going to work. And
Yeah.
then what? And then they're like, oh shit, all I did was piss somebody off. And now I don't have a follow up tool. And now I'm in a worse situation. So that's what the danger is that the difference is that ESD will also make adaptive strategies work, you know. So we try to adapt for the person that you are and the experience that you are. And so even me teaching as a white woman isn't going to necessarily be effective for you know, a trans man or a trans woman of color, or a person, you know, who identifies as black, who is going to not isn't going to immediately going to run and call the police because it's not safe for them to do that.
Well, and even, yeah, so for me, because I've had different people on here to interview and everything, and I love it. And somebody was asking me the other day, like, why would why would you do that? Because do you feel like that takes away business from you? Somebody might listen to what that person is saying and they find that it resonates with them. And I said, I want a student to find their perfect match. Like, I am not going to be everyone's perfect match.
Right.
Just like a martial arts instructor is not going to be everybody's perfect match. Most of my students have not taken martial arts. One of my greatest testimonials was from a woman who was in her 60s, and it wasn't because she had a confrontation with someone. It's because she fell on concrete and she was able to roll out of it. And she was like, thank you so much for teaching me how to roll. Like, so I think that it's just really important uh, for the martial artists out there who are instructors. I think that there's this competitiveness where it's just like my way is the right way, kind of like with different religions and stuff like that. But there's going to be someone out there for everyone who is going to
Absolutely.
resonate and want to be your student. And I think that that's the goal, is just, why not share your story, or Wendy Dragonfire's story, or different people's story.
Yep.
I love having all of these people on, because it's just like, yes, if that story resonates with you, I want you to be able to connect with that person and have that match, because it's about sharing the knowledge that's so important. It's about
Right.
making sure that they get the tools, because right now it is such a critical time. And that was my next question. It's such a critical time in the world. We have, this political climate that I don't, I, it's just so unprecedented with everything that's been going on. There's a part of me that's like, wow, this is shocking, but in another way, it's not.
Yep.
It's not. It's been building up like this for forever, and it just
Yep.
exploded. And then we also have this pandemic. So when it comes to all of these different adverse situations that may not actually have to do with a person, it might have to do with dealing with all of these outside sources. What do you tell your students? I don't give you easy questions, do
No,
I?
I think that it's really important to understand that we are in a culture that unfortunately still favors the kind of hierarchical male patriarch. And it is not a diss against any particular person. But we also have a culture that favors kind of power over. And we have seen that for a long time. And so anytime that we are doing anything that maybe changes that narrative, it's going to be uncomfortable and there's going to be pushback.
Mhm.
Um, I have been known to argue to such a degree because, similarly, I want to be right too. In terms of, I want to be right. But I recognize that when people, and this includes me, when I think I'm right about something, it's going to be really hard to change my point of view.
Yeah.
Um, so one thing I tell students is like, try to have dialogue, but not arguments. Do what works for you. And it's really hard to let go sometimes of the others in our life. If there are people in your life who are not valuing your perspective, consider reducing their impact in your life, even if it means letting them go. That's
Yes.
really, that's really hard with family because family we're much more tied to, but um, certainly with friend circles, I think it becomes easier. If if you are not feeling valued or taken care of, I mean, ultimately we are responsible for our own self-care, but it sometimes means we have to make hard choices. And I always tell people question everything that you hear, even from me. If I tell you something, it's not the final say just because I say it. Be in the question, be always in the question. Um, and I think part of it is the attitude. I remember, and Mary, my sensei, said, and I have taken this very much to heart. She is often said, be willing to not know. And I really live that in a lot. Like, I always feel like I know things, but I am not the be all and end all. And I have some expertise, but I am not an expert. So I always feel like I am in the role of always being open and to learning, but that is part of who I am. And as much as I think I know, I also have to be willing to not know. And this is the same when students ask me questions and I will say, I don't know. I would like, why don't you see what you can find out? I'll see what I can find out, and let's come back and discuss this more.
Nice. I like that.
So I think saying I don't know also means that you're willing to live with some discomfort. And I think right now we're all being asked to live with an awful lot of discomfort. And
Yeah.
it is, how willing are you to be in that discomfort and willingness of not knowing? Right now there is an awful lot of unknowables, and there are many things that we cannot control.
Yeah.
And for some people, that is an absolute no. They cannot, they need some kind of absolute. And we know that really, ultimately, there are no absolutes, but I think that leads what some people to the unfortunate conspiracies, or to heavy duty religion, or even cults where they will be told what to do, because for some people, that is what they need. And they have to follow their paths, but I won't follow those paths.
Yeah.
So, um, and I also don't want to be followed in that way. My path is my path. People can journey along with me, but their path is still their own. So
Yeah.
they need to follow their own course, and we can walk on the road together. But um, I again, I just constantly come back to, I'm not the ultimatum. I am I can be a guide, I can be a teacher, but I don't have the final say. Every person gets to have the final say about what their course and their path is. So I think that ultimately that's really what it is for me. And you know, uh, leave it to the person to find their way. So.
Well, thank you, Kim. That was so uplifting. And I wanted to know, how, if people are watching this and it resonates with them, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, one of these days I'm going to actually get my website up and completely running.
Yes.
I do have my website for Aikido up. I am not teaching I'm not teaching in person right now.
You're doing Zoom?
I'm doing some Zoom.
Okay.
My Aikido, if you do a search for Pittsfield, Pittsfield, Aikido, my Aikido style is part of Berkshire Hills Aikido, which is kind of a very independent style, very eclectic, very open. They can check that out. On Facebook, I at Labrys, Labrys. If anyone is curious about why I chose the Labrys, you can it was a tool of the Amazons. Certainly it was not meant to be a warfare object, but it was about um, cutting away falsehoods and dispelling falseness. So that's why I chose it. So Labrys ESD is on Facebook. I
Love
think
that.
just if they do at Labrys ESD, they can find me
Yeah.
on Facebook. And just my name. I'm not very searchable on Facebook by my name, but maybe that is just sort of way of keeping my own boundary around myself. But at Labrys ESD on Facebook should find them to my Facebook page, and they can and then Labrys self-defense at gmail.com. And I will always write back to people.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
if they want to inquire, eventually we'll get back to in-person training, which is much more comfortable for me than Zoom, but I will try Zoom. I did International Women's Self-Defense Day. Had a group sign on from New York City.
Oh,
I had
wow.
I did hybrid. I had like 9 people from New York City and 3 people who are in my kind of personal bubble in my dojo space, and we did a self-defense class,
Fun.
and it was really interesting, and we had some good discussions, and we got some practice in. So eventually we'll all get back on the mat. And I would say, of course, check out esdglobal.org.
Yes.
And National Women's NWMAF.org. Check out the National Women's Martial Arts
Yes.
Federation, all those places, because really it's not about necessarily me getting more students. It's really about making the world a safer and better place. So all these organizations are really great. And hey, go to your website. What's your website, Tasha?
Thank you. Wow. Dropping the line. It's ellieliveaction.com. Thank you so much.
Check it all out. Go there.
Yes.
That's
Well,
what we do.
well, Kim, you're amazing. I had one last question
Sure.
before you go. It was just for your younger self. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Worry less about what other people think, and follow your heart,
Awesome. Well,
and
thank
eat more
you.
chocolate.
Yes. When in doubt, always eat more chocolate. Well, thank you, Kim, for coming on.
Thank you.